friend as my guest, Uba Rostonics. Uba, how are you doing today?
Great. Good to be here, Rafael. I was really looking forward to this. Long time
I
coming.
know. I know. It's been a long time coming. It's my fault. I should have had you in the podcast a long time ago, but things happen. Before we get started, Uba, I would like for you to take a few minutes and just tell the audience who you are and how did you get to the point in your career where you're doing what you're doing.
Wow. That's so that's going to be a longer thing. So thanks for asking. Listen, so I started very early in my career. I had my own engineering company. We had a small engineering office. We would do industrial automation and things like that, working for some of the big brands in manufacturing and things like that. And then I saw the evolution. At that time telecom was booming, so I went to work for one of the larger telecom equipment manufacturers, Alcatel at that time, right, in French origins, and then purchased by Lucent afterwards, and now it's Finnish, right? So
Yeah.
it's things happen, and from there I spent about 20 years in corporate America working for the for large technology companies. I went into consulting, also helping basically the who's who in technology to develop their indirect sales organization, so their channel, their partner ecosystem, all that good stuff, and also with their customer success efforts, right? So, and the last few years, I started dipping my toes in small business. I come from that background of having my own company, so I understand the challenges and also the rewards that things like that bring. And I decided to combine a couple of things, and I like to say that I help companies to perform and transform, right? And we can talk more about that, but it's all about bringing a little bit of structure and order to the chaos, right? Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting path. Your path is somewhat similar to mine. That's where we ended up working together
Right.
in big corporate America. I like to tell people that I am a reforming corporate guy, as you know,
Yeah.
both you and I are doing our own thing and
Hmm.
enjoying and reaping the benefits and also the challenges of being out on your own.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit more about this concept of helping small businesses because again, you and I have a similar path. I also I started in a big company, then went to a startup, and they got gobbled up
Hmm.
multiple times, and then next thing you know, you blink and you're back in a giant company. At the
Yep.
time, that was Hewlett
Exactly.
Packard, Agilent, and then you end up with divestitures and this and that and whatnot, and now we're on our own. At the end of the day, one of the lessons that I have learned is that businesses, independent of size, are built around people. People
Oh
taking
yeah.
care of people,
Absolutely.
people taking care of each other, as co-workers, and people taking care of the clients. What are
Yep.
some of the lessons learned, in your point of view, going from that roller coaster of up and down, from small to big to medium-sized workplaces?
Hmm. So it's interesting what you say. It's all about the same, right? It's all about how do you serve your client, right? And who that client is. That's the question. But it's, for example, in people ask me, what do you want out of life? And when you go through these roller coasters, you set out on your own and all these things. It forces you a little bit to do some soul searching and introspection, right? And I said, well, how do I answer that question? How do I actually say what I want to do? And I came up with this thing that pretty much captures what I do, and I say, well, I like to work on interesting problems that matter with people that I love and who care, and provide as much value as I can. So it's a very simple idea. The reason why I bring that up is because it's what really makes me tick is to find this wicked problem and try to solve it for someone, right, and help them through the process. and then but also with people that is not obnoxious and whatever, right, who are really looking to and who care about what they are doing, right? So that's the idea, right? You have a client that needs something and you're trying to satisfy that. And but what changes throughout the process is where you need different tools for communicating, for working as a team, for making things happen as the organization grows or changes, right? It's the perform piece that I talk about. How do I help companies perform? It's about how do you go past that startup phase? And it's if you need a visual, is when you start something, you start an initiative, you are basically one, two, three, or maybe even five people in a garage, shouting orders at each other, and telling, do this, do that, I'm going to take care of that. And that works for a while. And but once you find, at that moment in time, probably the most important thing that you're trying to find is this thing that we call product market fit, so that you have a product or a service that you can sell to a certain market, to certain people. Once you find that, you start growing your sales. And when you start growing your sales, now you add member number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and guess what? Shouting at each other in the garage doesn't work anymore, right? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
shouting over each other. So now you need something that you bring in and you start putting some structure around this. Who communicates with whom, who takes care of what, all these different things. That's the first step. Now, you and I, we worked at regional divisions as well in companies, right? And what's interesting is that people think that large corporations are so different from small companies, and in reality, they are not, right? It's when you work at a regional division, it totally feels like a small business, right? Because you know exactly who's your partner in marketing, who's your partner in sales, right? All these different things. Who can fix your computer, if something goes wrong, and it operates exactly as a small business. The only thing is you're under the umbrella of a larger corporation, which can be good, right? Because that next month, payroll is going to get done, but they
Mm-hmm.
also make some stupid decisions that don't depend on your performance. They depend on the goals of the larger corporation. They sell you off, they close the department, they do things like this, and then you find yourself like, okay, it's not the path that you were expecting, right? So but the dynamics of that team, that's what really interests me. That team where you say, okay, you know, in my work with small organizations, what I find consistently is that one of the conversations that it takes us the most time is to draw out and put specific responsibilities on the org chart.
Mm.
Why? Because that's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to address. And they say, well, I know what you do, but they don't really know, right? And it's such an interesting thing, because it's like those unspoken, grudges and things that we hold with some person, right? It compares to that. I'm not saying that everything is negative, but vocalizing, spelling out these things is what really gets the organization moving afterwards, because now they know exactly, who reports to whom, who's responsible for what, and all these different things. It makes it so much more efficient. Right?
So that's interesting. So let's start picking that apart a little bit because there's a lot there that I want to dive
Mm-hmm.
into. You started by saying that you want to help people solve problems and you want to work with
Mm-hmm.
people. Basically, what I hear you say is something that I say also now is I want to work with people who believe what I believe, and
All right.
that's something that I got from Simon Sinek, who's
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know everybody knows who he is and all the great stuff that he's done. But once you do that, your addressable market shrinks dramatically
Perfect.
because the people that which it can be a good thing or it can become a
Hmm.
challenge because now you every possible client matters, right?
Right.
But the interesting thing is let's take the example you mentioned, right? Of there's a small company, there's six people, and they're all yelling on top of each other, but they're somehow producing, like in the sitcom Silicon Valley, right? They're
Right.
working in a house, and they're doing their thing,
Yeah.
and somehow things get done. What has worked for you to convince that group as they grow that they need to change what already worked for them, but
Hmm.
it's no longer going to work as they grow?
Yeah. That's an interesting thing. It's not easy, and I think that most of the time I end up working with people who already know that. It's very hard to convince someone that hey, this is not going to work in the future. They don't care about the future that much, right? It's you can see it coming, right? But until they don't get there, it's not going to work, and they're not going to listen to you. The and most of the time, you know, I don't teach. People tell me that I pontificate. I time to time I get into my soapbox and I speak, right? But
You and me both.
right, right. But the the smarter thing to do here is to let them figure out things, right? Let people figure out their own thing because hey, you know more about your business than I do, right? You know a lot more about the business than I do. So I can guide you, I can help you, hey, call out your BS and things like that, right? But in reality the answer is coming come from you. And that's a phrase that I love, and I love to say the answer is already in the room. The answer is already in the room. Someone has the answer here, right? And that's where it comes from. The Now I forgot what you exactly asked me, but you also mentioned that every single client matters, and that's true. I just spoke recently to a friend of mine. She's trying to start up, an event business and whatever, and she said, well, we went from the phase of throwing spaghetti at the wall to now throwing spaghetti at one wall. Kind of like start reducing, right, that addressable market. But the thing is it's so important to focus. It's so important to know who's your ideal customer. Uh, you know, it's 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 a shame when you try to produce all that value and everything, and people don't see the value in what you provide. It even comes down sometimes to places where they don't even want to pay, right? Things like that. And this is a super important thing. And here we're going to lean into technology a little bit. Everything, every company and their grandmother are shifting to an as a service model, right? And there's reasons for that, right? It makes revenue more predictable, right? You get the same amount of money every month, et cetera, and it increases your valuation tremendously, right? Because now when you're trying to sell the company, you come in front of your investor or the person who's trying to buy it, and you can tell them exactly, listen, this is not something that I have to go out and sell and land new customers. I do have my historic data of doing that, but these customers are already on a contract, and you just have to operate the business, and the money's going to keep coming in, right? So that increases your valuation. Now, think about this. Whenever you buy a service that you don't like, that you are absolutely not in love with, what happens a month or 2 months later?
Oh, you cancel it.
You cancel it, right? So that's the in the new world that we are looking at, right, where things are as a service, are based on an ongoing relationship with the client and things like that, landing the right customer becomes super super important. So that focus, where you say these are the clients that I'm looking at, and by the way, there's all this, addressable market that I could go after, but you just filter them out. It's so important because it's gonna really help you build your business and grow your business. So it is a hard decision to make in the beginning, right? And say I'm gonna throw spaghetti at this wall and not the other three, right? But it's fundamental, right? If you want to scale. Yeah.
So let me throw something at you and see if you resonate with it or not. Because my experience, if I were to sum everything up that I learned from being in a large company, then being in a startup, and then being in an even larger company, and then now
Hmm.
being on my own, is that independent of who you are, or in your case, who your client is, independent of whether your client is a small business or your client is a larger corporation, one thing that there are two things that I found that I see in common with a segment of that population. One is the inability to be introspective, meaning
Mm.
they don't do a good job observing themselves,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then two
Hmm.
is resistance to change,
Yeah.
right? This whole adage of if it's not broke, don't fix it type model.
Yep.
I've seen that in large corporations, of course, because large corporations they have a lot of momentum and it's very difficult to course correct.
Yeah.
But I also see that in small startups, just like you said, it's like, if it's working, they just keep going until they hit a brick wall or at least get close to it. Do you see eye to eye with that, or do you see it being a bit more complicated?
So no, I mean it's versions of that, right? It's so the introspection piece. It's I have this thing where I say, listen, you really have to, because sometimes, one of the things that I do is you mentioned the large company, right? And we learned a lot of different things. The systems, the processes, the communication style, all these different things that large, well run. Let me make that caveat. Well run companies do really really well. Um, are the product of years and years of multiple MBA people, working at a company and developing those systems and processes and things and putting them in place and trying things that didn't work and what have you, right? A small business doesn't have the luxury of going through that process of building those, processes over the years. And most of the time they can't afford, many MBAs. They can maybe, the founder has something or not even that, right? We glorify the dropout anyway, right? So so it's one of the things that I do is I use what it's called a business operating system. And a business operating system, what it is a templatized way of doing what large corporations do really well. Okay? So instead of going out and saying, hey, I'm going to find a tailor to make me a suit, you go out and you buy something off the rack, right? And you try it on, and if it doesn't work, maybe you stitch here or there, right? But that's it, right? You use that, and it's 99% good, right? So in that process, I asked them, listen, let's have an offsite, you know, and the offsite, the reason is because I want to get them out of the business. I want to get them out of, the phone ringing, the hey, the delivery truck just came, all those things that are happening in the business. And what I say is that we have to stop working in the business to work on the business. And that's the introspection piece. Okay. So here is where we turn things around and we say, okay, let's look at your business. Let's not from the inside. It's very hard to read the label from inside a bottle, right? So we take them out, right? We just force them to look at the business from the outside, and then from there develop it. Now, resistance to change, that's I think that's human nature, and there's people who have it's kind of like cilantro, right? There's people who have the gene who like it and who don't like it, right? Most people don't like change. I love change. I thrive in change, right? I feel alive. I just love it, right? So I'm an oddball in that sense, and sometimes I have run into a wall because of that. But the thing is this, um, you know, most companies are getting to the point where you said it. It worked before. Don't break, right? Why fix it if it's working, right? But the thing is, it's not working. It's and the realization doesn't come immediately, but it's always like, okay, I've been doing this thing that has worked until now, and I keep doing it, and I can't grow. And it's like I can't figure it out. It has worked until now, and now I continue to do it, and I can't grow. I hit a wall all the time, right? Guess what? It's because what you've been doing so far, it's not going to work to get you where you want to go, right? So you have to shift certain things. It doesn't have to be what we call the forklift upgrade, right? Take it out and put something new in. But you probably have to start looking at things differently to get you there. And it always happens, the companies get to these growth spurs, where they kind of like things get stuck and now they have to get to the next level. That's such a overused term, get to the next level, right? But it's true. You get to a level and you kind of like, it's like in the video game, right? You're on level 6 and you've been doing certain things. When you get to level 7, what you were doing on level 6 doesn't work anymore. And you keep dying all the time, right? So you have to try something different because you just change the level, you change the game, basically, right? So that's what I think it is. I don't know if this helps, but that's the way I see it.